What's up, Summoners? King Blair here. Today, we're going to be talking about the current banner heroes, Celine, as well as Flan, as well as Mediator Kawerik, and whether or not you should pull for them. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server, link down in the description. But without further ado, let's get right into it. As always, I like to start these with a summary, so you guys get the mindset of what's coming in the future, as well as the actual units themselves, and then we'll go deeper into each of the units' kits. So first, the summary. What can you expect? I know I've been saying it for the past like 2 months, but the collab is coming, and Summer Seaside Rerun, as well as a new summer unit that is confirmed, are right around the corner. That is potentially 2 to 3 limiteds coming out in the next 3 months, right? And you need to have those resources ready to be able to pull for them. Now, we have had some other crazy banners, so bookmarks may be low, so make sure you are saving for all those limiteds that we know are good, right? So just make sure you're ready for them. We also know that Ilnuff is coming next week. He's going to be a Fire Knight, and I'll talk more about her when she comes out. She seems really fun, and she'll be a really spicy option for PvP. She looks like something that will be pretty fun, right? So just know that if you're wanting to get that, that may play into not pulling into these, right? And as far as the Mystics, we know that Ruel is the most likely one to come next. So we most likely will get Ruel as the next Mystic rotation, banner rotation hero. And then we most likely are going to get something like ML Charles as the next ML, right? So just know that those things are coming. And we also know that Ruel banner will have the new ML Kawerik most likely. So we know that these things are coming for the Mystic rotation. So now, as far as the unit summary, and now that you have the mindset of what's coming in the future. So first, with Celine, with all of these, by the way, they don't really function for PvE. Emma Kawerik, maybe. Not anything I can think of at the top of my head right now. Maybe Katie's Hunt. Honestly, I don't really know how the hunt works, but I know that he does give the top of immunity. But I don't know but I know for a fact the other two are not going to actually do really anything for PvE, right? You can maybe force them in PvE, but they're not there to be PvE, which is one of the things that I don't like recommending these units for earlier game players when they're very specific and niche in PvP and don't have many uses outside of that. So that's already, it's something that it's more playstyle. So you have to realize what your playstyle is and if you think you can incorporate the unit. As far as Celine, she's going to be primarily to counter cleaves, particularly Oxlot's cleave or Soundadami cleaves. Now this type of cleaving is not as popular higher up in RTA. Most people tend to use Polides or F10A, units that don't use non-attack skills, so Celine is often not used. We are seeing more top model Luluka though, and we are seeing more Maid Chloe, so she does have a good matchup against this type of supports since she can actually trigger her S2 on those supports and potentially kill their DPSs outright. So kind of a spice option against Maid Chloe. It's something that I personally want to try, but besides that, she's mostly a counter pick unit. You're not really using her all that often unless you're trying to counter a specific thing. So very specific, can definitely use. Would recommend saving. So unless you really like her or you really hate Oxlots and challenge Adami and want to have a counter to these type of cleaves, then by all means, pull for Celine. As far as Flan, she's on the opposite spectrum. Does get countered by Celine because she has a non-attack S2 and S3. But the big thing with Flan is she recently did get a buff and a lot of people are still playing around with her. Usually it takes a couple of months, honestly, before people realize the full breadth of a buff. The buffs to Flan were very good and they have made her really, really powerful. The S2 giving attack buff and crit damage buff is pretty cool. The S3 being able to soul burn and give you that S2, again, also really, really cool. The biggest thing right now with Flan potentially holding her back is going to be the fact that because she's an opener and there's so much immunity in the meta, right? A lot of people run immunity on their units, and you usually don't have a unit faster than Flan. That means you're not going to get to do the Soulburn S3, S2 combo. You're most likely doing an S2, waiting to rotate, and then doing the S3 in a later turn, right? So there's definitely some playability with Flan. She definitely has some really cool options. If you go for a slower Flan with Bazaar, and you have Bazaar go first and then Flan, that's a really cool combo for Arena, and it could probably get you a ton of Ws in Arena. So again, she's a cleave unit primarily, right? So if you're a cleaver and you want something spicy, Flan by all means is really, really cool and can definitely function. And a lot of cleavers are taking a look at her because they think she has a ton of potential, and she really does. So if you're a cleaver and you want more options, she's good. If you've never cleaved in your life, you're probably not going to be using Flan. And if you already have an established sleeve and you don't think Flan could fit in there, I wouldn't recommend it, right? But mostly Bazaar style cleaves are going to be the things that right now for Flan you would do in Arena. But we'll talk about that when we look at the kit. As far as ML Kawerik, a lot of people keep ripping on him, and I understand people think he's weak and useless. He's not actually useless. He's just I don't think he's worth pity. The big thing is going to be another support that can cleanse, immunity, attack buff. Really, really good S3. Like the S3 cleanse, immunity, attack buff is amazing. It's just the rest of the kit doesn't really bolster it at all, but the S3 alone is good enough to make him a usable unit, and we'll talk about that when we talk about him in depth. Who we're going to be starting is with Kawerik, since he's the one that you probably came here for, because you have no idea if you should be spending your mystics for this guy. So let's actually go straight to him. Kawerik, who strangely is a warrior, and there are some things, artifact complications that does bring that we'll talk about. So first, let's look at the stats. When he is maxed awaken, he has really good HP, has pretty good defense, not great, nothing crazy, but pretty good, right? Pretty solid. Quite slow, right? 102 is pretty slow. It's really slow, right? When you consider things like Bazaar that are considered slow as 108, things that are like openers are 115, that's an extra 10 speed that you inherently don't have compared to these faster units. So you're not going to be taking turn 1, but it's enough to do his job, right? So that's the big thing. He doesn't get anything else. No FRES, which we'll talk about, is kind of a big deal, right? That he does not get inherent FRES in his awakenings, but he does get a lot of bulk. Now we have the imprint, where if we see he actually does get FRES. This is really nice because it actually does complement his kit. If you do manage to get him triple SS, you can get some really good FRES on this guy and make it so he could be a pretty annoying support. Kind of similar to like DJ Bazaar, that he can cleanse and do all the stuff after, right? So FRES, pretty nice, especially because he doesn't get it himself. Now the thing I mentioned with me a warrior, it does let him do Strake's Gauntlet, which gives you the highest raw stat value. 60% FRES is nothing to laugh at. That means that he essentially can have, with the imprint, 87% FRES with Strake's Gauntlet just starting, but it just still kind of sucks he doesn't get it from the base stats and that he has to lose access to his artifact because of that. But now let's actually look at the skills. As far as design, this dude looks sick, right? I've always felt Kawerik looks sick, and this guy is no different. I was looking at him and I was like, man, this guy looks so cool. He looks really cool, right? Looks aside though, let's actually look at the kit. The S1, nothing crazy, right? Honestly, really right? It's kind of when you think of all these other units. Like, make Chloe stuns, and if she stuns, she gets 20% CR push AoE, right? This guy is just a raw 15% CR push to the highest CR unit in your team. That's not crazy, right? That's very basic. The damage is not insane on this skill. It's a support skill. And people want to try him with counter, but I don't even know if it's worth it on counter because it's only for one unit, right? There's a lot of really good CR pushing skills right now. When you think of things like Maid Chloe's S1, when you think of things like General Purgis's S2, just like the passive if you hit him. There's a lot of really good CR push. I mean, it is nice, but it's nothing crazy. And that's one of the biggest problems I have with him is parts of his kits just don't really feel good, right? Like, they don't feel great. This skill is not great. Can it be annoying? Yes. 15% can let you cut in certain situations and get more tempo, which is nice, but nothing crazy. Then as far as the S2, again, another very mess skill. It's not a passive, which usually a lot of MLs have passives. This guy does not. This skill is going to be a single target damage attack that decreases attack of the enemy for 2 turns and gives you a barrier. The damage is proportionate to the health, and the barrier is proportionate to your ally's health. Now, there are 2 things that make this skill not great. First thing, this does not strip. So if they have immunity, you are not landing that decreased attack break. The other thing is that it's single target, right? Which means you can't hit Landies with this. You can't hit Stennis with this. You can't hit Carrots, but they will probably have immunity and they can just cleanse it, right? So it's not great. And the barrier, my problem with the barrier is that it's based on the ally's health. This means that if you have a tank, it's amazing, right? Because if you have a Fallen Cecilia, that Fallen Cecilia is getting a fat barrier, right? Like a thick barrier. But if you have a squishy unit like a Stene, that Stene is only going to be getting like a 1k barrier. So it's a really weak barrier for your DPSs, but a really good barrier for your tanks and bruisers, right? It's a very bruiser related type barrier and kind of a S2. Ray does an S2 that heals and gives barrier and has the exact same effect as this one. But this one decreases attack and it does a little bit of damage. So it's kind of like there's better skills out there. So those 2 skills, very underwhelming, right? Nothing crazy. But now we get to the S3. This S3, I almost want to say, is one of the best S3s in the game. And I'm saying that right now. And this is the reason why I think Kawerik will actually see play. This S3 is ridiculously strong. This is his whole kit. You look at this S3, that's all he's got. The S1, S2, trash. S3, this S3 is crazy good. It's one of the best. Why is it so good, right? It AoE cleanses, increases attack, and gives immunity. You can soul burn it to give 3 turns. And also the animation looks sick, by the way. This animation is honestly like, oh man, it's so cool. I did try to pull for him. I'm not gonna pull too much more. I'm pretty far from pity, so I can afford it. If I was at pity, I would not be pulling right now. But this skill is really, really good, and I don't want to underhype this guy because he will definitely see play. This guy will definitely be in your matches. You will definitely have to go against Kawerik. Why is this skill so good? So when we think about characters that have similar skills to this, we think of Maid Chloe. Maid Chloe has just recently been released, and she has made a massive splash in the meta. Why? Because she is able to cleanse 2 debuffs, give attack buff, and then be able to heal, right? The heal is pretty important part of Maid, but the big thing she's there is honestly for the attack buff, right? Same thing to an extent, General Perk is the attack buff. Attack buff is a really good buff right now. And immunity as well. There's a lot of things that apply random debuffs. General Perk is stuns, carry burns, what else? What F10, right? Can just destroy your team. A Tywin can just stun your team. There's a lot of just passive units that can provoke you, right? Like Craw provokes, right? Having immunity is invaluable right now. So attack buff and immunity. This is so good. And it does counter Carrot, who's one of the biggest DPSs right now. As we mentioned, Carrot can strip and burn. If you have an Kawerik, we mentioned he's slow, but in a way it helps him because most Carrots float around 230 speed higher up. So if the Carrot takes a turn first, if they use their S3, you're able to just cleanse everything and give your team immunity and attack buff, making it so they cannot retaliate as easily. If they hold on to the S3, well, now you have 2 buffs, potentially 3, depending how slow their carrots are, which means that you can stack buffs and make it so she can potentially not strip the right buff, and then she doesn't get the burns, and then she just loses, right? And you can attack her freely and not worry about the retaliation from the burn, since you have AoE immunity. This skill is just ridiculously powerful, right? Again, it's one of the best skills in this game. DJ Bazaar and Mei are very similar skills to this, and both those units are seeing increasing levels of play because of how good their S3s are and because how important immunity is, right? So just as S3 alone being able to give you attack buff and being able to give you immunity and cleansing, it's all very, very invaluable. Him being a warrior and potentially having high FRS if you want him to go that route also helps a lot to be able to counter things like F10 and just control overall, because you can already start him with 87, kind of like a Kitty Cat Clarissa. In that same realm of thought, you can get him pretty high FRS, right? So overall, what are my thoughts on Mediator Kawerik? He's gonna be played for sure. The S3 is everything. If you don't like the S3 and you don't think you can incorporate the S3 in your team, then he's not for you because he does not have anything else in his kit. He is legit a walking S3. And I'm not happy with that because I don't like units that don't really have a kit that is just, they're there for one skill. I'm not a fan of that. I feel like it's also not unique because we do have Maid Chloe, we do have DJ Bazaar, we have General Purgus that can just give attack buff and CR push. So he kind of doesn't feel any niche, but he is really good at the niche he does. So I don't want to underhype him. He's going to be used. He's going to be good. If you do have him or you end up pulling him, he's not a bad unit. I would definitely build him. I tried to pull for him because I feel like he'd fit really well into my team compositions. And I definitely think he'll have play. I personally would not pity for him just because I'm not a... I already have DJ Bazaar. I have Vivian. I have other ways to get immunity and attack buff. I have other ways of cleansing. So I'm not in need of him, and you may necessarily need him, but he is very, very good, right? Because of that S3. Now, as far as Flan and Celine, we are going to go a little bit faster, so this video doesn't become a 30+ minute video, and because they have been out for a long time. So first, Flan. Pretty basic stats, pretty basic opener stats. Not great HP, not great defense, not really good attack, but has really good speed and has really good effectiveness, which is what she needs to land her debuffs. Pretty basic, right? Imprint is going to be effectiveness for herself and attack for the allies, which again, really, really good for cleave. It's the traditional cleave setup stat line, right? Or for like engager, right? It's pretty standard, pretty basic. The S1, if you are seeing this S1, it probably means you are losing the fight. If you're using your S1, things did not go right because you're using a cleave unit, right? If you're having to use your S1, it's not great. But does she have a good S1? She has a decent one, right? Unable to be both can definitely mess up an opponent in the right time. And I do know people that will actually use the skill in certain situations to be able to deny the opponent certain buffs, right? Later on, like those retaliatory buffs. If you're able to do your cleave and then maybe set up an unbuffable, maybe stop something from getting a defense buff or an attack buff from one of the slower units, right? Nothing crazy, but I mean, you probably should not even be seeing this skill that often. Does not put unbuffable, my bad. It just dispels, right? So it's pretty good if they set up increased defense with a craw or if they set up attack buff. You know, it's nice. Dispelling is nice. And you can definitely use it for Asimacon if you really want. I am so sorry I completely misread that skill. I was thinking of Elfelt. My bad. I was definitely thinking of Elfelt. It dispels one buff, which again, it's nice. It's you should not be seeing it, but it's nice. The S2 is actually going to be the skill that I think is actually really strong because it's kind of an Oxlot's push since it pushes up by 40%, I believe. Yeah, it pushes up 40%, which is enough to usually get your ally the next turn, unless the enemy is really, really fast or your Flan is really, really fast. But for the most part, you can give a faster DPS unit attack buff and critical hit damage buff. This is single-handedly the highest boost to a unit you can have. It essentially gives a unit a turn with attack buff and critical hit damage. It's the best support skill that I know of. It's better than Oxalt's in that it gives crit damage buff and it's more aggressive. So this skill, really, really good. Could honestly probably use it for Dark Expedition. Now that I'm looking at her kit, she's actually not bad for Dark Expedition. It's actually a really solid kit for Dark Expedition. So this skill, pretty nice, right? Pretty solid. Pushes up, attack buff, critical hit damage buff. Nice. Then for the S3, you have the main reason you may want to use her and why she's actually pretty good with something like a Bazaar. It's an AoE, decreased defense, and unhealable. What's really unique about this skill is that unlike someone like Tywin, it does not hit them. Why is that big? It will not trigger things like a Tywin. It will not trigger things like Champion Serato. It will not trigger things like T-Surns, right? If you hit T-Surns a certain, like too hard, they sometimes will push up and disrupt your cleave. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about Moonlight Dreamblade. You don't have to worry about Miss, like all this other stuff, glancing hit. That's really cool, and it actually does make it really unique. You see there what one of the problems may be is if you just miss the debuff. Because of 15%, right? The other thing this skill does is it actually does push CR back. So if you're able to strip with Bazaar, you can also push them back even a little bit more and potentially lap with her and then be able to do this one. So overall, very, very standard cleave unit, right? She's there to buff a unit, give attack buff and crit damage buff, and go from there. As far as where you can use her, now that I think about it, she actually could be decent for Dark Expedition. Like pretty nice actually. Like the more I think about it, she's not bad for Dark Expedition. She has the ways to get rid of. She has ways to get rid of the debuff. She has ways to push up the DPS unit and give them really good debuffs. And she has a way to reduce defense, which again is pretty nice. And she can just take away the defense buff. So actually really solid for Dark Expedition, but mostly going to be for Guild Wars, PvP, Arena, and RTA. RTA a little bit harder to draft. I know someone that used her in a Ludwig cleave and has seen a lot of success with her. And I know a lot of people like her for Arena if they can do Bazaar, and for Guild Wars. You can also set up with a Bazaar and a big damage dealer. The fact that you're able to soul burn this skill and get an extra turn is invaluable now, because not only can you set up, but you can also push up your unit with the buff. Honestly, really fun with BBK. If you have a Bazaar, BBK, and Flan, it will be really, really cool. Really, really awesome. Big problem with her in particular, of course, it's going to be Polides, right? So Polides being in arena defense, being so popular, kind of stops her from being that good in arena. And in Guild Wars, you're not going to see as much Polides, but again, it's the same thing in RTA. If you're trying to use her, you're going to have to ban Polides or pick her, which is something that cleave players are using in RTA. So overall, cleave unit, again, would I recommend her? Not really, unless you're a cleaver. She can definitely have success. There is a lot of counters to her in Arena, and there are counters to her in RTA, but with the right team composition, you can actually make her work. Again, I mentioned one legend player I know actually does use her, and there is a lot of potential for her in the future as a cleave unit. But now, as last but definitely not least, we have none other than Celine, who honestly, it's still one of my favorite units look-wise and animation-wise. She looks gorgeous in terms of all this stuff. As far as stats, she has the same stats as Violet, I believe, where she has dummy high HP, non-existent defense, really good attack, really good speed, really good crit rate, right? So all the stats, solid, but the defense is non-existent. That's kind of like where you lose the stats, is the defense. This essentially makes it so you can't really make her a bruiser, just because it's so hard to bump up this defense and make it so she doesn't just get one shot and deleted, right? And that's the same thing with Violet, and even to an extent, Rylet, who even has higher defense. It's hard to make them bruisers, and especially her, she doesn't really have that much survivability. You can't give her Moonlight Dreamblade, but then she's not going to do her job at one-shotting, right? So she kind of conflicting kids. As far as the imprint attack makes so much sense for her because she just wants to be able to kill the target with an S2 that we'll look at in a second. So now let's look at her overall. The S1, super basic skill. It's legit just damage. This does a shocking amount of damage. If you've ever been bonked by a Celine, you know that this does dummy damage. Like, it'll do like AK on a FCC, right? Like if you have an FCC and they bonk you, that's AK, right? You're just taking AK to the face, right? So it may just be all damage, but it's really good damage. So it's pretty basic. Not much to talk about there. The S2 is the one that people really like her for, and it's the reason why she can counter things like Flan and Oxlots, and even things like Maid Chloe. Whenever you use a non-attack skill, you're able to activate Blink and attack an enemy. The reason why this skill is so much better now, and there's two different things you can actually do this right now that people are kind of playing around with. One makes it so this skill will target the highest attack enemy with their EE, right? She does have an EE that gives her more stats. With the EE, you can attack, and EE is exclusive equipment that you can get in the shop in the Hollow Trials. In case anyone's wondering, if you still have questions on that, leave a comment down below. But as far as this S2, if you have the EE that attacks the highest attack enemy, that's really good for stopping Oxlot's cleave. That's really good for stopping Flank cleave, because you're just going to come in, attack the highest attack enemy, kill them, and then they just lost their cleave, right? And then you just win, right? So that's really cool. The other one is that when she uses the skill, she gets stealth. Those are the two big ones that people use. The stealth one is really nice because if they try to set up on you with a Maid Chloe and have a single target DPS to try to mess you up, you're able to essentially do the S2, do a ton of damage to a random enemy, and then be able to get stealth and potentially survive a little bit longer. So there's some unique builds out there, and I want to try a Bruiser one because I think it'd be really cool into Maid Chloe. But again, with Carrot everywhere, it's not that great. And then of course the S3 dispels all devils from the caster and attacks, right? And increases evasion for 2 turns, giving some survivability as well as recovering as much of the damage you dealt. This skill does a really good amount of damage, and it's pretty nice, right? It's a really solid S3, right? It's a really cool S3. You won't really see it that often, but it comes up every once in a while if you are using your Celine. But again, evasion is really, really nice. One thing I forgot to mention about this too is it also does ignore damage sharing, which is one of the reasons people used to use her for anti-SSB. Since you can just ignore Aureus, or if they have the T-Crosset, you can just ignore the T-Crosset. So overall, where can you use her? She's going to be primarily for countering, cleave, and support style units. That does lock her a lot, and it's one of the reasons I don't recommend her, especially to earlier game players, because you're not going to be able to A, get the stats that she needs, and B, use her often, so you're essentially putting a lot of resources into a unit you're not going to be using. Again, if you're playing this game just for the collector and you love the waifus and you want to pull for her, she looks gorgeous. But again, there's so many limiteds coming. There's Ilna. There's way too much stuff coming. Sadly, I have to say, Celine, I would personally skip. She does have potential, but with Carrot being out right now, and then we're getting Ilna, there's a lot of really strong fire units out right now, particularly just Carrot. Honestly, man, Carrot just destroys her. Just eats her alive, right? Because you just burn her, and they just get popped right away. So sadly, really hard right now. Would be doing really good against Maid Chloe if it was just Maid Chloe, because she could actually kill Landy, and potentially even kill Astene. But because of Carrot, if they have Maid Chloe and Carrot, you are not killing anything with Celine. I do think she has potential to be spicy this meta, but I just don't think it's worth for you guys to pull. But again, it depends on your count and depends how much you hate Oxlots as well. If you hate Oxlots, it's also a really good option to have in the bank and potentially use in those situations. Usually a 4-spin, or even things like Talmud Luluka, right? Although not as much if they have Dignitas Orb. But that is going to be it for those 3 units. So kind of just to summarize the video as a whole, Celine, counter to cleave, probably skip just because she's so specific and you're not going to be using her that often and she's really hard to build. Flan, if you're a cleaver, something you can think about. I still don't particularly recommend it. It is a really good option, but you can still cleave without Flan, and there are counters to her such as Polides in Arena, and in RTA it's unless you're doing a Polides cleave, it's going to be hard to incorporate her, although you definitely can, and if you're a cleaver, it's definitely an option for you. And then for Kawerik, I personally wouldn't go to pity for it. If you think it fits your account perfectly, because the attack buff is something you need in the cleansing, and you have no other cleanser. You have no DJB, you have no Maid, no Vivian, and you want to have that cleanse attack buff immunity. He is really good for that, right? He is a good unit. He is a good unit, right? I just don't personally think he doesn't have as much as an impact for my account, right? So I wouldn't pity for him, but he is a good unit because of that amazing S3. But that is all I got, and I will see you next time. Peace.